All right, let's go ahead and move on to the second part of humanistic therapy, and that is Fritz Perls' theory. And I actually had to make a separate slideshow because I had some problems with the recording of the other one. So this is the same face slide as the last one, but we'll go ahead and move on to Perls' theory. Okay, so Gestalt or existential therapy was formally founded by Frederick Perls. He goes by Fritz or went by Fritz in the 1940s, 1950s. And it's a type of therapy that is a humanistic therapy. So it's based on the idea of focusing on the self, of growth, and of change with a little bit of a different twist. So it's a type of therapy that's based on awareness of bodily feelings, emotions, and behavior in the present moment. So let me ask you a question. I want you to just stop for a minute and think about your answer to this question. Where are you at today? Where are you at? I'm not saying, and I don't mean, oh, I'm at my house, I'm in my bedroom. I mean, where's your head at? Where are you? Where's your being at? And you may have a variety of answers to that. You might be just feeling anxious. You might be feeling peaceful. So it's asking about how you're feeling, but even a little bit more than that. So whatever your answer to that question is, that's asking an existential kind of question. It's asking a Gestalt question. You may have heard of Gestalt psychology. Maybe you studied it for about 30 seconds in intro psych, or maybe you've taken sensation and perception. So this type of therapy is very loosely based on Gestalt psychology. So let's talk about that a little bit more. This picture here is of Perls. As we're going to see, he was really into the same movement that Rogers was in the 1950s and the 1960s, the kind of the generation self-discovery and let's all hang out and be who we are and discover who we are. And he did a lot of group retreats in California. So this is a picture from that. So Gestalt therapy looks very much at the relationship between the self and the environment, which is really what Gestalt psychology is all about. What is your place in the environment, and how does that lead to mental health or mental problems? So what is your place in the environment, and how do you relate to that? Let me give you just a little bit of background on Fritz himself. He was in the German army during World War I, which obviously was a big factor on his life and the way he thought about things. He eventually became a psychiatrist and specialized actually in psychoanalysis. And because he was Jewish, he in the 1930s ended up running out of Germany to try and flee from Hitler. And he ended up living in a number of different places and became eventually a cruise ship psychiatrist at one point before he actually emigrated and settled down in the United States. I can't imagine. I know, I've been on a lot of cruises and they all have physicians and nurses, but psychiatrists, I'm not sure what you would need a psychiatrist for if you're on a cruise ship, and he was known for founding the Gestalt therapy and Gestalt psychology in particular in the 1950s. So he's considered the founder of that. Here's another picture taken from one of his retreats in California. Later in his life, this will be a little bit later than what we see the film with Gloria later on this week. So let's just get right to his therapy and talking about that. As a quick refresher, Gestalt psychology looks at pieces and parts and wholes. So when you look at this object in the upper right-hand screen, you might see 3 circles and a triangle, even though there are not 3 circles and there's not a whole triangle, depending on how you look at it. There are parts of those. But our eye and our perceptual system puts it together in terms of wholes. Gestalt psychology and therapy sees people in the same way, and the form of treatment says that we have to understand people in terms of wholes, not separate from the environment. So if I have a client in my office and I'm trying to understand them and I'm asking questions about their family and their mental health symptoms and other things going on in their life, I absolutely have to understand the environment in which they function in. You know, what's their school like? What is their religion like? What is their home life like? So you cannot understand people just by looking at the particular parts of them and who they are. You have to absolutely understand the environment. So with that in mind, when we look at the therapy, let's first talk about a couple of the basic concepts that are important for Gestalt therapy. And the first one is a concept called the phenomenal field, PF for short, and this is the context in which a person functions. So the way to think about this is, what are the settings in which you function? Physical settings, the friends you you hang out with, your school, your home, your church, your workplace. So the phenomenal field really is that environment that I just talked about. So keep that in mind. We can't understand a person unless we understand their phenomenal field. And the figure-ground relationship helps a person to determine what aspect of the phenomenal field to focus on. So the figure-ground relationship speaks to our needs, and our needs at any given moment determine what aspect of the phenomenal field is important. So let's say, for example, you're listening to this lecture and you're really hungry. So you would be considered the figure, and what you're doing listening to this lecture would be in the background. But if you're really hungry, this lecture isn't going to matter because you've got a need that's not met. That's one way to think about it. If you have a need to be alone, and right now this is probably true for a lot of you, especially if you're living with your families, if you have a need to be alone, you are focused very much on that need and thinking about your environment and your background and how you're able to get that need met. So every element in the phenomenal field is determined by its relationship with other elements in the field. So the way to think about this is that it's like a stew. Every element in our phenomenal field is determined by its interactions with other elements. So let me explain that, because I know that sounds kind of strange. Think about a stew here. So you know how when you've got a stew and you pick up a piece of carrot and eat it, what kinds of flavors can you taste in that carrot? You can probably taste some of the potato, and you can taste some of the meat in the carrot. If you pick up the potato and eat that, you can taste the meat, you can taste the carrot. So basically, every other piece in that stew influences another piece and colors that piece. It's influenced by that piece. The same way with our life. Your life at school is influenced by your life at home, is influenced by your religion, is influenced by your job. So the bottom line here is, there isn't a piece in the background of our life, in our field, that's not influenced by another part of the field. So hopefully that makes sense. Every part of our life is influenced by another part of our life. So my teaching, for example, is influenced by my family, my son and my husband. My teaching is influenced by friendships that I have, and I could go on and on. So they all influence each other. That's a good way to think about it. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Gestalt existential personality theory that influences the theory of therapy. I really get a kick out of this picture of Pearls. It's just so odd, but he was kind of odd also, in a good way. All right, so the personality theory, it's important to remember, is a reflection of the 1960s and 1970s U.S. culture. There was really an emphasis on self-actualization, on personal growth, on me, me, me. It's kind of the me, me, me generation, so keep that in mind. So the first thing we'll talk about with personality theory is this idea of responsibility. The theory here is that people are able to direct their own development. You are responsible for yourself. And what Pearl says is that we are response-able. Responsibility means response-able. We are able to make responses depending on what our environment is and what comes up for us. So we are very much in charge of our own lives and our own destiny. Pearls also adopts the self-actualizing, but it's a little bit different than Rogers. So in Pearl's theory, he says that we have an inherent motive to self-actualize, and that's common to all humans, so that's just like what Rogers said. But Rogers was more future-oriented. We're always in a process of becoming. We're reaching for that fully functioning person. It's just kind of a gradual thing. But for Pearls, the focus is on being, not becoming. It's on now. It's on who you are now and becoming aware of who you are now and self-actualizing now. So it's future-oriented versus present-oriented. That's really, I think, the best way to think about it. Okay, now as we're working on self-actualizing, this involves necessarily relationships with other people. And Pearl's had some things to say about how we respond and behave in relationships toward other people that reflects our process of becoming. So he has a concept that's called contact. Contact is when you experience a boundary between something or someone other than yourself. So another way to think about it is we differentiate between ourselves and other people or other things, and then we connect ourselves to other people and other things. So when we experience that boundary between me and not me, that's what's called contact. Now we know that we regularly make contact with and then pull away from an environment according to our needs at the moment. So let me take the example again of a lot of you are home with your families, probably privacy and personal space is not real great, and you may be experiencing a real need to have some space and some time to yourself. So you're very aware of that boundary between yourself and your family members. But then after you have some of that time for a while, you're ready to reconnect to that family. So whenever you experience that you need to withdraw or you need to get closer, you are experiencing contact. So contact is an important thing that we have to experience. And when you see the Gloria film with Pearls, he's going to talk some about that. Now, this process of this pulling away and then coming closer is called discrimination. We normally think about discrimination, of course, as a bad thing. In Pearl's theory, it's a good thing because when we can discriminate, we can approach the environment and then pull back from the environment according to our needs. So if you have a need to be closer to people, you'll call them or text them or FaceTime them or something. And then if you have more of a need to pull back, then you will back away and take care of yourself as far as what you need to do. So discrimination is a good thing. So let me map this out for you here on this next slide. So when we lose contact up here under confusion, we lose that boundary between ourselves and somebody else. So the line between me and somebody else, me and you, me and not me, it merges, it gets real fuzzy. So that's what's called confusion, when the self equals the other and your boundary is lost, your identity is lost. And obviously we can think of examples of that. It happens a lot when people get involved in relationships with other people, they kind of lose their individual identity. So we don't want confusion. We also don't want isolation. So isolation is the second, my cursor's not working right there, right? The second piece here, where you are stepped so far back from the boundary between yourself and someone else that you lose contact. So you're acutely aware that yourself doesn't equal somebody else, but that connectedness is lost. So really, in an ideal world, this is what we need. Come to that boundary, maintain that boundary so you can have connectedness and also a good boundary between you and the other person. So this is an ideal, healthy situation right here to maintain that. Now, when you are able to do that successfully, and that's something that we learn, I think, as we get older and experience more relationships, you have learned to self-regulate. So self-regulation is when you know how to draw back, withdraw, and then approach other people or things in order to get your needs met. Not their needs, but your needs. So self-regulation is a really healthy, positive thing that people need to be able to do. If you can self-regulate, you can successfully get your needs met, is the bottom line. I was thinking about this a little bit the other day. Me and my husband and my son, we're all introverts. My husband's an extreme introvert. I am a sociable introvert, and my son is, I don't know what he is. He's kind of a mix of both of us, I guess. But this isolation, this social distancing is really hard for us because we don't have a huge house. We have a ranch, so it's not like somebody can go upstairs to get away from everybody. And obviously we have individual rooms that we can go in, but it seems like we're mostly clustered in our kitchen family great room area, and it's been tough because, especially for me, because I'm used to having some time to myself. So the self-regulation is going strong over here, let me tell you. Okay, so what about when this process goes awry? Then we may have some difficulties with maladaptive behavior. We run into problems with mental health when we are not able to self-regulate, when we lack self-regulation. We lose our ability to act on our needs through contact with the phenomenal field. So you make contact with the phenomenal field and approach when you have a need, and then you pull back contact when you need to withdraw, when you need more time. So let's talk a little bit about why people can't self-regulate. What is the problem? Why do people lack self-regulation? So the first one is a lack of awareness, and I've got stars by this one because really this is the most, I'm having trouble here. This is the most critical one. That's the main reason why people can't self-regulate. They lack awareness. When you have awareness, you know your environment, you know what you're feeling, and you know what you're experiencing in the moment. But if you're struggling with this, you're not doing so well. So you may not be aware of what your needs are. Maybe you don't realize you need to be alone, or you need to be with people, or you're not aware of your environment and how to get that need met. I've had clients in the past who will talk about how they've really been burned by relationships before, and now they've got an attitude that they don't need anybody, that they're fine by themselves and they don't need anybody. Well, that's a person that lacks awareness of their needs for sure. We also can lack self-regulation if we lack self-responsibility, that response-able I talk about. This is when you put most of the responsibility for yourself on other people or on the environment. As we're going to see in the Gloria films, Gloria has a tendency to do that. She puts responsibility for her feelings on the therapist. She does that time and time again, responsibility. So you will see that. We also know that you lack self-regulation ability with your inability to complete gestalts. So remember, a gestalt is a whole, being able to see all the parts for a whole. And what we're really talking about here is unfinished business or baggage. You know, we've heard of that before, people who have a lot of baggage. So unfinished business are issues from the past which are going to influence our present behavior. So for example, if you lived in a family with a single parent, one of your parents left, you may have issues with feelings of abandonment, and you may carry that over into your present relationships. We all have unfinished business. We all have baggage. But if you allow that to kind of monopolize who you are and your psyche, then that can lead to a lack of self-regulation. So the unfinished business is some unfulfilled need or feeling which really dominates our awareness. So one way to think about it is that it colors everything else we do. It colors our relationships. Another example here is perfection. We know you can think of people who have to do everything perfectly in terms of schoolwork and relationships, and you know, that's not healthy, and that's probably an example of unfinished business, but it doesn't allow you to self-regulate. So what do we do about it? Let's talk a little bit about Gestalt therapy here and how Gestalt therapy can help us to self-regulate. The goal of Gestalt therapy is to increase our awareness. It's present-centered, increase awareness, and boy, when you see that film of Pearls with Gloria, you will see that he just hammers that home. He very much stays into the moment. So what the increasing awareness leads to is something called integration. So integration, when you become integrated, you identify with all parts of yourself. So think about the Gestalt model here. We're made up of parts. For example, we're made up of behaviors, thoughts, feelings, perceptions. Those are all the parts. But we put them together to become who we are. So when you integrate, you can integrate and identify all those parts of yourself and accept them. So another way to think about this is a great quote I found: to become whole, which of course is one of the goals of Gestalt therapy, you have to accept what you want to reject about yourself. So think about all the things about yourself that you may not like as much, but in order to become healthy and whole, you still have to integrate those into your personality. Maybe you have a personality characteristic of being really cynical. You have a hard time, you know, you're kind of a cup half empty sort of person. You're very cynical. And so in order to be healthy, you have to figure out how to work that into your personality. If you spend time obsessing about it or perseverating about it, you're not going to be able to be healthy, at least according to Gestalt therapy here. We're also going to encourage clients under Gestalt therapy to take responsibility for themselves, to stop just talking about their problems and start really experiencing them. So that's part of the here and now. So clients will mention, this relationship went bad and here's why, and I had this problem and that problem. So what you're going to see Pearls do with Gloria in the video, and another clip I'm going to show you, is that he just doesn't allow that to happen. He basically goes after her and talks about how she is feeling now. And the point is, when you're talking about an experience, you're really in your head. You're not feeling the emotions that come along with that. You're more in your head and talking about it intellectually. And when you have an intellectual conversation with someone, you might feel good about it, but it doesn't. It's the access problem. It's the emotions that are the issue, and not so much the talking between people and in your head that's really so much the issue. So you have to directly experiencing things, and you will see that in these videos. One example would be untapped grief. Not everyone mourns the same way. Not everybody has to experience grief the same way. But for people who have grief that needs somewhere to go and needs to be dealt with, this is a good example of that. So let's talk about some techniques. This video here, by the way, I will post the link to that in the description section of this video. So I would like you to take a look at it. Now, it's a video that shows you examples of some of the techniques that I'm going to be talking about here next. And I just want to give you a little warning here that it's like crash course Gestalt therapy. No Gestalt therapist would cram this many techniques into this kind of 5-minute segment. This is done only for demonstration purposes. So if you're really put off by the fact that this guy goes from one to the next and just keeps after this guy, it's just done for demonstration, just so you can see how they look. Now, the other thing is, I am putting a separate video here under this class playlist of myself demonstrating a couple of these techniques. I have my husband tape it this afternoon. So please take a look at that, because I wanted to explain a little bit more and show you what those techniques look like. Okay, so a couple Gestalt therapy techniques. This first one I will demonstrate for you in the video. I've actually already posted it. It's called the empty chair technique. And as I'll explain, this is really good for resolving internal conflicts with yourself or conflicts with other people. So intrapersonal is a conflict with yourself. Interpersonal is a conflict with someone else. And so it involves having the client, let's say this guy in the picture, actually talking literally to an empty chair, and he may have someone figuratively sitting in that chair who he has a conflict with. So maybe it's his wife, I don't know. So his wife is sitting in the chair and he is telling her things that he feels like he wants and needs to tell her. Then he will switch seats and respond back as his wife would respond, and then he will actually keep physically switching seats and keep that dialogue. Now, the actual switching seats is really important, because if people just pretend to do this, it just does not seem to have the same effect. Clients will sometimes resist doing this technique. They might feel silly. It's really good for clients who have an imagination, but once they get into it, it really is very helpful for seeing how they very much feel about situations. And it's particularly helpful, I think, for the intrapersonal stuff, for talking to another part of themselves that they may be denying or they may not be listening to. Sometimes I'll do this for clients who have to make a decision about something. So say if a client's trying to make a decision about whether to stay in a relationship or not, I will have them do the empty chair and have them talk to the part of themselves that they're battling with. So let's take this guy, for example. Say he really wants to get a divorce, but he's not sure. So he, as the client, may be voicing reasons why he wants a divorce, and then he'll sit in the other chair and talk as the other part of himself who really doesn't want to. So it's very effective, and you'll see that more example in the video that I posted. Okay, a second technique is role playing and fantasy. I don't demonstrate this, but Pearls does do this with Gloria. So, with the role playing and the fantasy, what you do is have clients visualize an experience to recreate their feelings. And it could be in the way of an unexpected event or a metaphor. So, you could combine psychoanalysis here using that parent child adult model and have them visualize the hurt inner child and have them talk about what that hurt inner child feels like. Have them role play that hurt inner child. So I had a personal experience with this technique that I want to share with you because it's really been one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced. Years and years ago, oops, excuse me, I'm struggling to get comfortable here. Years and years ago, I owned a house and I lived there by myself, and the house was broken into one night while I was home. It was a home invasion kind of situation here. And I was hurt. I got hurt in that encounter, and ended up selling the house. It was just so hard. I ended up selling the house and moving back in with my parents. And this was long before I met my husband and such. And so I was living with my parents and just recovering. It was really hard. And then I just started getting this terrible sore throat and just wouldn't go away. And I went to the doctor, and it wasn't strep and it wasn't this and it wasn't that. Couldn't figure it out. For months, this thing went on. And I had gone back to a counselor that I had seen off and on over years just to process this event. And she decided to do this technique with me one day. And so she had me close my eyes and envision what this sore throat felt like. And I remember so clearly, I was envisioning a big rock in my throat, just sitting there, causing me pain. And she had me describe it and what did it look like, and did it make any sounds, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I went through that, and I mean, I knew what she was doing. By this time I was a psychologist, but I went through it. And so I left the session, and then the next day the sore throat was on, and I'm telling you, it never came back. After months and months of a daily sore throat, it was gone after that day. So I am a believer in the role playing and the fantasy. It's very, very powerful. It can be very powerful for clients. So anyway, that's my personal story there. Okay. We also work with personal pronouns with clients, and in particular, this gets back to that responsibility. Lots of times clients will say to you, I can't leave this relationship because, I can't leave this job because, I can't confront my mother because. And when you hear clients saying, I can't, they're not taking responsibility for their behavior. They're putting it off on something or someone else. So when you hear that, have clients say instead, change I can't to I won't. And then it becomes, I won't leave this relationship because XYZ. I won't leave my job because XYZ. I won't make this decision because whatever. Saying I won't, even though it sounds similar, it's different. I won't is personal responsibility. I can't is putting responsibility on someone else. So this makes clients very aware, because remember, this is all about awareness, very aware of why they choose to do things that they do and choose things that they don't. Because really, what we talk about is life is just a series of decisions. You make a decision with the best information you can, and not all of them are good. That's the human condition. And then if you see that the outcome isn't good, then you make another decision. And I'm not making it out to be like I think it's easy, because there are lots of hard situations, but life is a series of choices. Okay, exaggeration and repetition. Now I show you this in the little video that I posted, and you will see this with Gloria and Pearls. This is just a little video clip from there, or it's a still picture from there. She kind of waves her arm, and he has her do this over and over, and it really irritates her, and clients oftentimes don't understand why you're doing it, but what you'll see in the video is it really makes her aware of what that's about. Gestalt psychology is all about everything we do is for a reason. Everything is purposeful, and we're going to try and figure that out. Maybe not figure out the reason for it, but look at the feeling behind it. So the point of this is that our body really very much communicates things that we're not even aware of. Not from a psychoanalytic standpoint, but our body communicates emotions that we might not be able to articulate ourselves. Okay, so just to wrap up Gestalt psychology here, I want to do just a quick evaluation of it and talk about its pros and cons. Some of the beneficial things for it, it is an awesome therapy for exploring feelings. You'll see in the videotape with Pearls that they really don't even talk about content. It's all exploring feelings and talk about feelings. It helps clients to really avoid intellectualizing, to get out of their head and more into their feelings. And it's wonderful for capitalizing on and looking at nonverbal behavior and trying to explore the meanings behind nonverbal behavior. The cons of it, one of the biggest cons is that some clients don't like it because it seems ambiguous. It's not directive, it's not structured. When you see the two videos that not just the Pearls video, but the other video I'm going to attach to this one, you'll see how it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. You'll ask yourself in the Pearls video, are they even talking about anything? You might be confused, but that's because it lacks structure. It's more about identifying and feeling your feelings than achieving some goal. It is not effective in a crisis. So if somebody comes in with a crisis, we're not going to do this. You need to be more directive and more goal-oriented in a crisis. But other than that, it's still a leading technique for really getting clients to figure out what's going on with them and experience where they are in the present moment.